June 1942, Sevastopol. Soviet sniper Lyudmila Pavlichenko lay motionless in the ruins of a bombed building, watching through her scope as a German officer moved across an open courtyard 400 meters away. For 3 days she had been hunting this particular target, a Wehrmacht sniper who had killed dozens of Soviet soldiers and had been specifically sent to eliminate her. As the German paused to light a cigarette, Pavlichenko squeezed her trigger. The shot was perfect, and the most dangerous sniper duel of World War II was over. It was kill number 309 for the 25-year-old history student who had become the deadliest female sniper in history. The Germans called her Lady Death and had placed a bounty on her head higher than any other Soviet soldier. But to her comrades, she was simply Lyuda, the quiet university student who could kill a man at 800 meters and then return to her history books as if nothing had happened. This incredible story is completely true, every detail verified by Soviet military records and German documents. If you love hearing about real heroes like this, make sure to subscribe. We share these amazing true stories regularly. What makes Lyudmila Pavlichenko's story so extraordinary isn't just that she killed 309 enemy soldiers. It is how she went from studying medieval history to becoming the most feared sniper on the Eastern Front in just 6 months. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, Pavlichenko was a 25-year-old graduate student writing her thesis on the medieval period. She had never been in combat, never killed anyone, and was planning a quiet career as a university professor. But by 1942, she had become such an effective killer that the Germans assigned entire units to hunt her down. Her reputation was so fearsome that enemy soldiers would refuse to advance if they knew Lady Death was in the area. Most remarkably, after accumulating more confirmed kills than most elite male snipers, Pavlichenko was sent on a diplomatic mission to America, where she became an international celebrity and proved that Soviet women were fighting and winning on equal terms with men. Lyudmila Mikhailovna Pavlichenko was born on the 12th of July, 1916 in Bielotserkva, Ukraine, during one of the most turbulent periods in Russian and Ukrainian history. Her childhood was shaped by revolution, civil war, and the massive social upheavals that transformed the former Russian Empire into the Soviet Union. Growing up in the 1920s and 1930s, Lyudmila experienced the contradictions of Soviet society, a system that promised equality for women while demanding absolute loyalty to the state. Unlike many young women of her generation who were encouraged to pursue careers in education or medicine, Lyudmila developed interests that crossed traditional gender boundaries. As a teenager, Lyudmila became fascinated with marksmanship through a local shooting club that had been established to provide pre-military training for Soviet youth. The program was part of the government's effort to prepare the entire population for potential conflict, but few people took it seriously until war actually came. Lyudmila proved to be a natural marksman with extraordinary hand, eye coordination, and the patience required for precision shooting. Her instructors were impressed not only by her accuracy, but also by her analytical approach to marksmanship. She studied wind patterns, light conditions, and ballistics with the same methodical attention she brought to her academic work. But marksmanship was just a hobby for Lyudmila, whose primary passion was history. She enrolled at Kiev University in 1937, focusing on medieval and ancient history with the goal of becoming a university professor and researcher. Lyudmila's academic work was exceptional, and by 1941 she was completing her graduate studies while working as a research assistant. Her professors considered her one of the most promising young historians in the Soviet Union, with a bright future in academic research. Her life was typical of an educated young Soviet woman in the late 1930s. She was engaged to be married, planning a career in education, and had little interest in politics or military affairs. The growing tensions in Europe seemed distant from her quiet world of libraries and lecture halls. Everything changed on the 22nd of June, 1941, when Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in history. Over 3.8 million German and Axis soldiers attacked along a front stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, aiming to destroy the Soviet Union within 6 months. The initial German assault was devastatingly successful. Soviet forces were caught completely by surprise, and within weeks German armies had advanced hundreds of miles into Soviet territory, capturing millions of prisoners and destroying entire armies. As reports of German atrocities reached Kiev, Lyudmila faced a choice that millions of Soviet citizens were confronting: flee eastward ahead of the advancing German forces, or stay and fight for their homeland. Lyudmila's decision was immediate and uncompromising. On the 25th of June, 1941, just 3 days after the invasion began, she walked into a Red Army recruiting station and volunteered for combat duty as a sniper. The recruiting officers were initially skeptical. While the Soviet Union was more progressive than most countries regarding women in combat roles, female snipers were still relatively rare, and many military leaders doubted that women could handle the psychological pressure of killing at close range. But Lyudmila's shooting scores during her evaluation were so exceptional that her recruiters had no choice but to accept her application. She was immediately assigned to the 25th Rifle Division and sent for accelerated training at a sniper school outside Moscow. The training was intensive and designed to transform civilians into effective killers within weeks rather than months. Lyudmila learned advanced marksmanship techniques, camouflage and concealment, fieldcraft, and the psychological techniques necessary for close-range killing. But most importantly, she learned to think like a hunter. Successful sniping required patience, analytical thinking, and the ability to predict enemy behavior, skills that her academic training had actually prepared her for better than traditional military experience. By October 1941, Lyudmila was ready for combat assignment. She was sent to the Odessa front, where Soviet forces were desperately trying to hold the important Black Sea port against German and Romanian attacks. At 25 years old, with a university degree and no previous combat experience, Lyudmila Pavlichenko was about to discover whether her academic intelligence and natural marksmanship could be translated into battlefield effectiveness against some of the most experienced soldiers in the world. Lyudmila Pavlichenko arrived at the Odessa front in October 1941 during one of the most desperate periods of the siege. German and Romanian forces had surrounded the port city and were conducting daily attacks designed to capture what was then the Soviet Union's most important naval base on the Black Sea. The fighting around Odessa was characterized by close-quarters urban combat that favored defenders who knew the terrain and could use buildings and rubble for concealment. It was exactly the kind of environment where a skilled sniper could be most effective. Lyudmila's first kill came within hours of her arrival at the front lines. A German officer was directing an assault on a Soviet position from what he thought was a safe distance. Lyudmila, concealed in the ruins of a bombed apartment building, took careful aim and fired a single shot that killed the officer instantly. The psychological impact of the kill surprised Lyudmila. Despite her military training, she had never actually taken a human life, and the reality of killing was more emotionally complex than she had anticipated. But she also felt a sense of satisfaction. She was contributing directly to the defense of her homeland. Over the following weeks, Lyudmila developed the methodical approach to sniping that would make her the most effective female killer in military history. She studied German tactics and behavior patterns, identified optimal shooting positions, and learned to remain motionless for hours while waiting for the perfect shot. Lyudmila's kill count began to rise steadily. 10 confirmed kills in her first week, 25 by the end of her first month, 50 by December. Each kill was carefully documented and verified according to Soviet military procedures that required eyewitness confirmation or physical evidence. But Lyudmila's effectiveness was not just about marksmanship, it was about psychological warfare. German soldiers began to fear areas where she was known to be operating, and officers started changing their routines to avoid exposure to sniper fire. The psychological impact became even more pronounced when German intelligence identified Lyudmila as the sniper responsible for many of their officer casualties. They began broadcasting propaganda messages over loudspeakers, attempting to demoralize her by threatening what they would do if she were captured. But the propaganda had the opposite effect. Instead of intimidating Lyudmila, it convinced her that she was having a significant impact on enemy morale. She began to take pride in the fear she was instilling in German forces. Lyudmila's most challenging period came in early 1942, when German forces launched their final assault on Odessa. The siege had lasted 73 days, and Soviet commanders finally decided that the city could no longer be held against overwhelming enemy forces. During the evacuation of Odessa, Lyudmila served as part of the rear guard that held German forces back while Soviet troops and equipment were loaded onto ships for transport to other fronts. It was during this period that she achieved some of her most impressive kills, including several German snipers who had been specifically sent to eliminate her. By the time Odessa fell in April 1942, Lyudmila had accumulated 187 confirmed kills, more than many male snipers achieved in entire military careers. But her war was far from over. Lyudmila was reassigned to the defense of Sevastopol, the heavily fortified naval base in Crimea that was considered one of the most important strategic positions on the Black Sea. The siege of Sevastopol would become one of the longest and most brutal battles of the Eastern Front, lasting 250 days and resulting in hundreds of thousands of casualties. The fighting at Sevastopol was even more intense than Odessa, with German forces using massive artillery bombardments and aerial attacks to soften Soviet defenses before launching infantry assaults. It was in this hell of constant bombardment that Lyudmila would achieve her greatest successes and earn her reputation as the deadliest female soldier in history. But it was also at Sevastopol that Lyudmila would face her greatest challenge. German counter-sniper specialists who had been specifically trained to hunt and kill Soviet snipers. The Battle of Sevastopol would become a deadly game of cat and mouse between some of the most skilled marksmen on both sides of the conflict. The siege of Sevastopol began in earnest in November 1942 when German forces surrounded the heavily fortified Soviet naval base and began what would become one of the longest and most brutal battles of World War II for Lyudmila Pavlichenko. Sevastopol represented both opportunity and mortal danger. The urban terrain of Sevastopol was ideal for sniper operations. The city was filled with bombed buildings, rubble-strewn streets, and underground positions that provided excellent concealment for a patient marksman. But the same terrain also favored German snipers who were hunting Soviet defenders. Lyudmila quickly established herself as the most effective sniper in her sector, accumulating kills at a rate that attracted attention from both Soviet commanders and German intelligence officers. Her methodical approach to hunting enemy soldiers made her particularly deadly against German officers and specialists. But Lyudmila's growing reputation also made her a priority target for German counter-sniper operations. Wehrmacht commanders began assigning their best marksmen specifically to hunt and eliminate the Soviet sniper, who was causing such significant casualties among their officer corps. The result was a series of deadly sniper duels that would become legendary among soldiers on both sides. These encounters were exercises in patience, skill, and psychological warfare that could last for days and often ended with one sniper dead and the other barely alive. Lyudmila's most famous duel came in May 1942 when German forces assigned a highly experienced sniper named Ernst Konings to eliminate her. Konings had over 200 confirmed kills and was considered one of the Wehrmacht's most effective marksmen. The duel began when Konings took up position in a bombed church tower that provided excellent visibility over Lyudmila's usual hunting grounds. For 3 days, the two snipers stalked each other through the ruins of Sevastopol, each trying to anticipate the other's position and movements. Lyudmila finally gained the advantage by using a technique she had learned from studying medieval siege warfare in her academic research. Instead of trying to outshoot Konings directly, she positioned herself where she could observe his likely escape routes and waited for him to make a mistake. When Konings finally exposed himself while changing positions, Lyudmila was ready. Her shot struck him in the head from a distance of over 400 meters, adding kill number 264 to her total, and eliminating one of Germany's most dangerous snipers. The psychological impact of this victory was enormous. German soldiers in Lyudmila's sector became increasingly reluctant to expose themselves during daylight hours, and officer casualties dropped significantly as commanders began avoiding areas where she was known to operate. But Lyudmila's success also increased the danger she faced. German commanders assigned entire squads to hunt her, using tactics that included artillery bombardments of suspected sniper positions and coordinated infantry assaults designed to flush her out of concealment. The pressure became even more intense when German intelligence learned Lyudmila's name and began broadcasting personal threats over loudspeakers. They offered rewards to any soldier who could capture or kill her, and described in graphic detail what they planned to do to the Russian she-devil if they caught her. Lyudmila's response to these psychological warfare tactics was characteristically methodical. Instead of being intimidated, she used the German broadcasts to locate enemy command posts and communications equipment, then targeted the personnel responsible for the propaganda operations. By June 1942, Lyudmila had accumulated over 300 confirmed kills, making her one of the most effective snipers in the entire Red Army. Her reputation had spread far beyond Sevastopol, and she had become a symbol of Soviet resistance and female capability in combat. But on the 27th of June, 1942, Lyudmila's combat career nearly ended when a German mortar shell exploded near her position, sending shrapnel across her face and temporarily blinding her left eye. The injury was serious enough to require evacuation to a military hospital. While Lyudmila was recovering from her wounds, Soviet propaganda officials made a decision that would transform her from a combat soldier into an international celebrity. They decided to send her to the United States as part of a diplomatic mission designed to encourage American support for the Soviet war effort. Lyudmila's final confirmed kill count was 309 enemy soldiers, 36 of them enemy snipers who had been specifically sent to hunt her. She had achieved this record in just 10 months of combat, making her not only the deadliest female sniper in history, but one of the most effective snipers of any gender in World War II. But her greatest challenge was still ahead, convincing skeptical Americans that Soviet women were fighting and dying as equals alongside men, and that the United States needed to do more to support the Soviet Union's desperate fight for survival against Nazi Germany. In August 1942, Lyudmila Pavlichenko arrived in New York City as part of a Soviet delegation seeking to strengthen the alliance between the USSR and the United States. For Americans who were still adjusting to the idea of women in combat roles, Lyudmila represented something completely unprecedented, a young, attractive woman who had killed more enemy soldiers than most male veterans. The American media was fascinated by Lyudmila's story, but their coverage often focused more on her appearance and personal life than on her military achievements. Reporters asked about her beauty routine, her romantic relationships, and whether killing had affected her femininity, questions that revealed American assumptions about gender roles in warfare. Lyudmila's response to such questions was direct and uncompromising. When one reporter asked why Soviet women wore makeup at the front lines, she replied, "You American women hide behind your powder and lipstick. But we Soviet women find it more efficient to hide behind 309 dead Germans." But Lyudmila also found unexpected allies among American women, particularly Eleanor Roosevelt, who understood the significance of her achievements and the importance of women's contributions to the war effort. The First Lady arranged for Lyudmila to speak at numerous rallies and events throughout her tour. Lyudmila's speeches at these events were powerful and effective, combining personal testimony about the horrors she had witnessed with carefully crafted arguments about the need for increased American military aid to the Soviet Union. She spoke about German atrocities, the desperate situation of Soviet forces, and the importance of opening a second front in Europe. Her most memorable speech came at a rally in Chicago, where she told the audience, "I am 25 years old, and I have killed 309 fascist occupants by now. Don't you think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long?" The comment was both a challenge to American men and a reminder that Soviet women were fighting while American soldiers had yet to engage German forces in significant numbers. The tour was enormously successful from a propaganda standpoint. Lyudmila became the first Soviet citizen to be received at the White House, where she met with President Roosevelt and discussed the military situation on the Eastern Front. Her celebrity status helped humanize the Soviet war effort for American audiences who had been skeptical of their communist allies. But the tour also revealed the cultural differences between Soviet and American societies. Americans were fascinated by Lyudmila's story, but struggled to understand how a woman could be both an effective killer and a symbol of female empowerment. Soviet propaganda, meanwhile, used her tour to demonstrate the superiority of communist gender equality. After returning to the Soviet Union in late 1942, Lyudmila was assigned to non-combat roles that utilized her celebrity status and combat experience. She served as a sniper instructor, training other Soviet marksmen in the techniques that had made her so effective against German forces. Lyudmila also completed her university education during the war, receiving her degree in history in 1943. She wrote her thesis on the Eastern Front, combining her academic training with her personal combat experience to analyze the military and social factors that determine success in modern warfare. After the war ended, Lyudmila chose to return to academic life rather than pursue a military career. She completed her doctorate in history and spent the next 3 decades teaching and conducting research at Kiev University, specializing in the social history of World War II, but Lyudmila never forgot her wartime experiences or the friends she had lost during the siege of Sevastopol. She remained active in veterans organizations and frequently spoke about the importance of remembering the sacrifices made by Soviet soldiers during the war. Lyudmila also became an advocate for women's equality, arguing that her wartime service had proven that women could perform any military role as effectively as men. Her example inspired generations of Soviet women to pursue careers in traditionally male-dominated fields. Lyudmila Pavlichenko died on the 10th of October 1974 at the age of 58, having lived long enough to see her story become part of Soviet military legend. Her funeral was attended by thousands of veterans and civilians who remembered her contributions to the victory over Nazi Germany. But perhaps Lyudmila's most important legacy was her demonstration that courage, skill, and dedication to duty have no gender boundaries. She proved that women could be effective combat soldiers while maintaining their humanity and their commitment to education, family, and peaceful pursuits. Her story remains relevant today as militaries around the world continue to debate the role of women in combat operations. Lyudmila Pavlichenko's 309 confirmed kills stand as permanent testimony that women can be just as effective as men in the most demanding and dangerous military roles. Lyudmila Pavlichenko's story shatters stereotypes about women in combat while demonstrating that extraordinary circumstances can transform ordinary people into legendary figures. The quiet history student who became the deadliest female sniper in history proved that courage and skill matter more than gender when defending your homeland. Her journey from university classroom to battlefield sniper shows us how quickly individuals can adapt to extreme circumstances when fighting for something they believe in. Lyudmila's methodical, analytical approach to warfare drew on the same intellectual skills that made her a promising historian. But perhaps most importantly, Lyudmila's story reminds us that heroism comes in many forms. She was simultaneously a killer and a scholar, a warrior and a diplomat, a celebrity and a teacher. Her life demonstrates that people can be complex and multifaceted, even under the most extreme circumstances. Her diplomatic tour of America also showed how individual stories can bridge cultural and ideological differences. Lyudmila's personal testimony about the war helped Americans understand the reality of the Eastern Front in ways that statistics and official reports could never convey. What do you think motivated Lyudmila to volunteer for combat duty when she could have remained safely in university? Was it patriotism, a sense of duty, or something deeper about her character? Share your thoughts in the comments. If stories of extraordinary women breaking barriers while serving their countries inspire you, subscribe for more incredible true tales from history's most remarkable warriors. Remember Lyudmila Pavlichenko's example. When your country needs you, gender boundaries become irrelevant, and anyone can become a hero if they're willing to fight for what matters most.